He was 83. She was 23. They said it was love. They said age was just a number. But 48 hours after saying, "I do," the billionaire was found dead in bed, his body untouched, his secrets very much not. No forced entry. No struggle. Just silk sheets and something missing. She vanished without a trace. No fingerprints. No footage. Just a smile and a wedding photo. And a trail of blood money nobody saw coming. This isn't a love story. It's a slow, surgical execution, wrapped in a veil. The spring sun burned over the Hale estate like a spotlight on a stage that no one believed was real. Guests arrived in disbelief, their designer heels sinking into imported marble walkways as valets in white gloves ushered them past water fountains carved like Greco-Roman gods. The Hale name had always meant power. Old money, oil money, an influence that stretched from Wall Street to Washington. But no one ever expected the family's next big headline to be this: an 83-year-old billionaire, a 23-year-old bride, and a wedding that reeked of something too beautiful to trust. Bernard Hale stood beneath an arch of blood-red roses, his back straight as a steel beam, though everyone knew the steel in his spine was artificial. His skin sagged beneath the weight of decades, but his eyes, those brilliant glacial blue eyes, still pierced through any man who dared doubt him. Bernard Hale didn't do anything halfway. Not wars, not mergers, not marriages. And yet, here he was, trembling slightly as he reached for the gloved hand of Amira Lewis, a woman 60 years his junior, who moved like smoke in a wedding gown that clung to her youth like silk to flame. There was a moment, just a flicker, when a gust of wind caught her veil and pulled it slightly from her face. And for the briefest second, someone watching could have sworn they saw something in her eyes. Not love, not joy, not even nerves, but calculation. She smiled sweet, submissive, glowing. The cameras loved her. Bernard's lawyers didn't. His family, seated in stony silence in the front row, watched the ceremony unfold like it was a burial. His son, Dean Hale, clenched his jaw so tight the muscles twitched. His daughter, Evelyn, didn't blink. And his granddaughter, Sadie, just shook her head, whispering to her fiancé, "He's lost it. He's completely lost it." But Bernard didn't care. He'd built a dynasty from Texas sand and global steel. He'd survived 6 back surgeries, 3 hostile takeovers, and 1 assassination attempt in Rio. No woman had ever destroyed him. Not his first wife, who drank herself to death. Not his second, who took half his empire and ran. Amira, he claimed, was different. He met her during a business gala in Morocco. At least that's the version he gave. She had no formal background, no high-profile family, no corporate ties. Just beauty, poise, and a voice that could soothe the sharpest edge of a man who'd spent his life making enemies. Their courtship was lightning fast and cloaked in secrecy. Bernard's staff signed NDAs. His children were left out of the will revision meetings. And just 6 weeks after the first whispers of their relationship reached the boardroom, wedding invitations were mailed out, each one sealed with a golden crest and printed with the words, "The future belongs to the brave." People thought it was branding. They were wrong. It was a warning. As the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Amira leaned in for the kiss. Her hand, small and smooth, cupped Bernard's cheek. His eyes fluttered shut as her lips pressed against his. And if he felt the chill running up her spine, he didn't show it. He didn't know that death wears a wedding dress, too. Applause thundered across the courtyard. Champagne fountains burst to life. Musicians began to play a string quartet rendition of At Last. And somewhere behind the curtain of luxury and laughter, the clock began ticking. 2 days. That's all it took. 2 days from "I do" to "he's gone." Later, staff would swear Bernard looked glowing at the reception. His longtime butler, Marcus, said the old man danced. For the first time in years, holding Amira's waist as if gravity didn't apply to him anymore. One guest claimed to even caught him whispering, "I've never felt so alive." He wasn't lying. He just didn't know that the feeling was his body's last surge of borrowed joy before the collapse. The wedding dinner was opulent. Black truffle risotto, gold leaf-wrapped steak medallions, hand-rolled cigars, and wine that had been buried longer than Amira had been alive. Speeches were made, most of them thinly veiled warnings in the shape of good wishes. Dean Hale's toast was icy. To my father, who's always had a taste for risk, may this be his greatest reward or his least painful lesson. Amira raised her glass with a soft smile. Bernard only laughed. It rained that night, soft and slow, like the sky was trying to rinse away the lie before it could settle. But nothing could wash away what was already in motion. At midnight, Amira guided Bernard up the spiral staircase to the master suite of the East Wing, the Hale Fortress, as staff called it, a private wing of the estate built like a palace. Velvet curtains, bulletproof glass, hidden vaults, a room meant to protect a king. Instead, it became his tomb. No one saw Bernard after that. No calls, no emails, no movement from his suite, just silence and locked doors. At 9:43 a.m., 2 days after wedding, a housemaid named Rosa approached the suite with breakfast, egg whites, half grapefruit, and medication schedule clipped to the tray. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Still silence. And then, with trembling hands, she used the emergency key she'd never once had to touch in 11 years she worked there. What she found inside stopped her heart. Bernard Hale, America's steel titan, oil baron, media tycoon, was lying in bed, eyes wide open, mouth slightly parted, lips tinged purple. Cold, still, gone. And Amira? Nowhere to be found. The champagne flute on her bedside was empty. Her dress hung like a ghost from the bathroom door. And on the vanity sat Bernard's newly signed will. The ink wasn't even dry. Before the mansion gates opened and the roses were arranged, before the wedding dress clung to her like silk on flame, Amira Lewis was a ghost. No social footprint. No traceable education. No family listed. The Hale family's private investigator, hired discreetly by Dean Hale 2 weeks before the wedding. Turn up almost nothing. No driver's license before age 20. No credit activity. Just a sudden appearance in New York 3 years ago under a name that didn't exist before. Amira Lewis was born out of nowhere. And for a woman like Eleanor Hale's replacement bride to arrive like fog and walk straight into power, that was no accident. It was design. She told Bernard she was raised between foster homes in Georgia, that her parents died in a fire when she was 7, that she'd spent her youth reading classic novels, helping raise younger children in group homes, learning empathy through pain. It was a story that curled itself around Bernard's weaknesses like a vine around an old tree. Youth, beauty, humility, and survival. He wanted to believe in her, not because she was convincing, but because she was exactly what he wanted her to be. She knew how to mirror loneliness. When he spoke of regrets, she nodded without words. When he stared out over his estate and confessed how everything felt empty since his wife's passing, she put her hand on his shoulder and didn't speak. And in the silence, he filled in the blanks. That was her genius. Amira never lied outright. She just let powerful men believe what they needed to. The few people would cross her before Bernard, wealthy patrons, minor tech investors, aging actors, had never lasted long enough to ask the right questions. By the time they realized they knew nothing about her, she had already disappeared from their lives, with something valuable left behind. A watch here, a trust fund withdrawal there, a stolen password or two. But Bernard Hale wasn't just another aging billionaire. He was a household name, and marrying him meant trading the shadows for the spotlight, a risk Amira had calculated and accepted. After all, if she could control the narrative fast enough, no one would be able to trace anything once the damage was done. Back in New York, she had gone by Alina Ross, a waitress at a members-only jazz club in Harlem, where billionaires want to forget their age and politicians want to forget their sins. That's where she learned how to disappear in plain sight. She watched men. She studied them. She learned how loneliness wears a suit. And then one night, Bernard walked in, alone, a king in a room of pawns. And the way his fingers trembled as he sipped whiskey, that's when she knew he was ripe. He returned 3 times before speaking to her. The 4th time, he asked her name. Amira, she lied and smiled. He never questioned it. He never would. What Bernard didn't know was that Amira wasn't born in Georgia. She wasn't raised in any foster home. Her birth certificate, if it still existed, bore a different name altogether. Samara Black, a child raised in Baltimore under a mother who cycled through addiction and men like dirty laundry. Samara stopped being a child at 12. By 15, she had learned how to pick locks and lie to police officers. By 17, she had 3 aliases. By 19, she vanished from Baltimore altogether, leaving behind a sealed juvenile record, a missing person report that no one followed up on, and a half-burned storage unit full of notebooks she used to practice new signatures. By 23, she was Amira Lewis, and now she was a Hale. The week before the wedding, Bernard's daughter Evelyn requested a private lunch. Amira accepted. They met at a rooftop restaurant in downtown Chicago. Evelyn arrived in all black, her stilettos clicking like gunshots. She didn't smile. "I know what you are," Evelyn said, sipping her wine without waiting for menus. "I'm sure you do," Amira answered, calm as glass. "I don't know how you convinced him, but let me make this very clear. You will not get away with it." Amira tilted her head, then leaned forward. "You think this is about money?" Evelyn blinked. Amira smiled softly. "Then you don't know your father at all." For a moment, Evelyn faltered, because the terrifying part wasn't a threat. It was a conviction. The calm in Amira's voice. Like the whole thing had already been decided. Like the wedding was an opportunity, but an execution. And Evelyn left that lunch shaken. Inside the estate, Amira moved like a bride possessed, not with love, but with purpose. She knew every hallway, every blind spot in the security system, every drawer where Bernard kept hard copies of his financial records. She had been studying the property for months. Not just the land, but the people. Rosa, the maid, like money. Peter, the groundskeeper, like silence. The security chief, already compromised. By the time the wedding date arrived, Amira wasn't marrying Bernard Hale. She was burying Bernard Hale's past and rewriting the future with her name on every line. The most chilling thing was how little emotion she showed after the body was discovered. The staff screamed. Evelyn collapsed. Dean stormed the room. But Amira? She stood barefoot in her robe, her hair still pinned from the night before, sipping from a crystal glass like nothing had happened. When asked where she'd been, she said softly, "In the bath." I didn't hear anything. When asked why she hadn't answered calls for hours, she replied, "I thought we were giving him time to rest." And when asked by the police if she would be okay to answer questions, she nodded and said, "I'll do anything to help. He was my husband." 3 words. Not a tear, not a crack in her voice. Just a perfect, rehearsed performance. Because Amira Lewis didn't feel fear. She created it. And in that moment, standing in the hallway where Bernard's body lay still in their wedding bed, she had already shifted into her next role, the grieving widow. Bernard Hale didn't build his empire by playing fair. He started with a shovel and a stretch of forgotten Texas land in 1963. Everyone laughed, said there was no oil left, that the drills had run dry, that he was just another kid chasing shadows of Rockefeller. But Bernard struck black gold within 18 months. By 30, he owned the land under 5 counties. By 35, he owned the men who once told him no. And from that moment on, Bernard Hale stopped asking for permission. His rise was ruthless, calculated, and littered with casualties. He bulldozed small-town contracts. He outbid local tycoons. He bought politicians, gagged journalists, and destroyed careers like they were bugs on his windshield. And every time he walked away from a battle, he walked away richer. But power, especially that kind of power, doesn't come without enemies. And Bernard had more than most. By the time he hit his 60s, Bernard was more than a businessman. He was a symbol. The Hale name stood at the top of corporate towers, blazed across oil rigs in the Middle East, etched into tech parks and private equity boards. But for every handshake he accepted, there were 10 knives waiting to be plunged into his back. There was Elliot Darby, the former CFO who'd been fired in 2009 after a whistleblower leaked documents about offshore tax shelters. Darby swore revenge, even went to media. But the media backed off after a mysterious fire destroyed his hard drive and his credibility. There was Veronica Hale, his second wife, who once claimed in court that Bernard emotionally tortured her for years, freezing her out of their accounts, hiring private investigators to monitor her, forcing NDAs on her staff. She walked away with $40 million and a heart full of venom. And then there were the children of men he crushed, the forgotten families of bankrupt CEOs, ruined investors, and former friends turned rivals. Some drank their shame. Others raised their children with one purpose: take down Bernard Hale. So when he announced his engagement to a 23-year-old woman no one had ever heard of, those enemies didn't blink. They didn't gasp. They smiled, because they knew something Bernard couldn't admit, even to himself. He was slipping. The lion was growing old. His memory had grown patchy. His moods erratic. His empire, while still vast, was increasingly run by other hands: his son Dean, his inner circle advisors, younger wolves circling the throne. The public didn't see it, but insiders did. There were rumors of mismeetings, forgotten passwords, sudden outbursts behind closed doors. The man who once ran boardrooms with an iron tongue now stared off during quarterly reports, distracted by something invisible. And that's when she appeared. Amira Lewis. Beautiful, young, conveniently tender. And exactly the kind of distraction that a vulture like Bernard Hale, isolated, aging, nostalgic, would fall for. Dean Hale watched it happen in real time. He tried to reason with his father. You're moving too fast. She could be a scam artist. Bernard laughed him off. I know a gold digger when I see one. She's not after my money. But Dean knew better. The old man had never been this soft. Never let anyone get this close this quickly. And the fact that he started rewriting his will only a month after meeting her, that was the final warning. Dean consulted a family attorney, who flagged 2 changes in the estate planning. A significant trust was being set up in Amira's name. If Bernard died after the wedding, she'd inherit a controlling interest in several private holdings. That wasn't love. That was leverage. And yet, Bernard refused to listen. I've earned the right to be happy, he said. And if I die tomorrow, at least I won't die alone. The words chilled Dean more than he admitted. What people didn't know, what Amira couldn't have known, was that Bernard expected to die soon. At least, that's what his journal suggested. 2 weeks after the funeral, Dean broke into the locked drawer of his father's personal study. Inside was a black leather-bound journal, Bernard's private log, dated from January to June. The last entry was 2 days before the wedding. Dean read it again and again. I see her watching me when she thinks I'm asleep. I wonder if she loves me, or if she's just better at pretending than the others. I don't care anymore. Let her have it. Let her take everything if it means I get to feel this one more time before the lights go out. If this is how I go, let it be with someone warm beside me, even if she's a mirage. Those weren't the words of a fool. They were the words of a man who saw the storm coming and welcomed it anyway. Bernard had faced down presidents, outlived rivals. But in the end, he chose comfort over caution. Of course, not everyone believed he went willingly. Detective Elias Monroe, the lead on the investigation after Bernard was found dead, saw it differently. People like Bernard don't just die in their sleep, he said. They're taken out. And the autopsy proved it. There were traces of an exotic barbiturate in Bernard's system, one not easily obtained in the U.S. The dosage was enough to scream murder, but was enough to raise eyebrows, especially since Amira had fled the estate within hours of the body being discovered. Her story? She left early to grieve alone. But no one believed that. Not Dean. Not Evelyn. Not Detective Monroe. Someone had helped her vanish. Someone with connections. Because 2 days after Bernard's death, Amira's name was flagged boarding a private charter from Chicago to the Cayman Islands. And then gone. No digital trail. No airport surveillance. No follow-up customs data. Just a ghost. Again, some say Bernard knew what was happening the night he died. That he drank the champagne knowing it was laced. That he chose to let her win because after all the enemies, after all the wars, he was tired of fighting. Others believe he was fooled until the very end. That the sedative hit too fast. That his heart gave out as he reached for help. But either way, One thing was clear. Bernard Hale didn't lose everything to an enemy. He gave it away to one he let into his bed. And when they finally buried him, the engraved stone at his grave read, "He conquered empires, but never himself." They called it Elysium, a name Bernard Hale had chosen himself, not out of vanity, but nostalgia. In Greek mythology, Elysium was a final resting place of heroes. Paradise, perfection. And Bernard believed he had earned that. The mansion, built on 75 acres of secluded lakefront land in upstate Illinois, stood like a monument to one man's unchallenged power. High iron gates guarded its winding path. Security cameras blinked from stone pillars. The driveway was flanked by imported marble statues, Greek gods carved by Italian hands. Inside, every inch of Elysium was handcrafted. Ceilings painted with gold leaf trim, mahogany floors that creaked like opera notes under polished soles, crystal chandeliers imported from Prague. There were 17 bathrooms, a heated indoor pool, a wine cellar that stretched beneath the home like a labyrinth, and 3 panic rooms, one for each wing. But beyond all the excess, what gave the estate its name was the silence. Elysium was too quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes with money and secrets. And for the last 2 days of Bernard Hale's life, it became the setting for the perfect crime. After the wedding, Amira changed. She'd been radiant at the ceremony. Flushed cheeks, trembling hands, soft glances at her new husband like a woman overwhelmed by joy. But once the guests disappeared, once the champagne dried and the staff was dismissed to their quarters, the mask slipped. She no longer looked at Bernard with adoration. She looked at him like a task. The honeymoon was never meant to be in Paris or the Amalfi Coast. Bernard insisted they spend the first days alone at Elysium. "It's ours now," he'd said. "Let's begin where my heart lives." He should have realized then his heart wouldn't survive the weekend. The first night was uneventful. They dined on filet mignon and Bordeaux in the West Atrium, the wind howling just beyond the stained glass windows. Amira said little. She smiled politely. She picked at her food. And when Bernard toasted to forever, she only raised her glass halfway. They retired to the East Wing shortly after midnight. The master suite was vast. Over 2,000 square feet of ivory wallpaper, velvet curtains, and a California king bed dressed in Egyptian cotton. The fireplace crackled as Bernard undressed and climbed into bed. He reached for her, his voice soft. But she turned away. "I'm tired," she said. "It's just a lot." He nodded. He believed her. But what Bernard didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Elysium had already been infiltrated. Amira had brought someone with her. Not physically. He wasn't inside the gates. But his presence was sewn into the plan. A man named Lance March, a former cybersecurity consultant turned dark web broker, had provided Amira with everything she needed. The sedatives, the burner phones, the untraceable cash, the offshore escape plan. And in exchange, she'd promised him 30% of whatever she walked away with. Lance had studied the blueprints of Elysium for months, mapped the security patterns, disabled the motion sensors in the East Corridor, even hijacked the estate's cloud surveillance system and looped the exterior feed with pre-recorded footage, which meant the night Bernard Hale was murdered, no one was watching. On the second night, it began. Amira rose at 1:17 a.m. She moved silently, her feet bare on the cold marble. The house was asleep, staff in their quarters, guards outside the perimeter. No one near the master suite. She slipped into the en suite bathroom and removed the small vial from beneath the sink. It was colorless, odorless, tasteless. One drop in a drink could sedate a full-grown man in minutes. Lance had smuggled it from Central America, untraceable. When she returned to the bed, Bernard was still awake, flipping through an old leather-bound journal. He smiled. "You're up?" "I couldn't sleep." He poured her a glass of wine, offered her one. She declined. She offered him a glass instead. He took it. Within 11 minutes, he was unconscious. Elysium, at that hour, became a temple of death. She worked quickly, gloves on, tools retrieved from her designer purse, a scalpel, forceps, sterile gauze. Bernard lay motionless, his breathing shallow but steady. She didn't kill him then. No, That wasn't the plan. The plan was to weaken him, confuse the cause of death, mask it in a blend of trauma and medication, so that by the time an autopsy was ordered, nothing would be conclusive. It was revenge, yes, but it was also a message. Someone had paid her. Not just Lance. Not just herself. Someone else wanted Bernard Hale humiliated, silenced, dismantled, and Elysium, his perfect palace, would be where the message was carved. By 2:43 a.m., it was done. She cleaned the wounds, redressed him, left no visible trace of what had occurred beneath the sheets. When the time came, he would simply never wake up. She reset the security system manually, packed a small duffel bag, left the house through the east greenhouse, and slipped into the pre-ordered SUV waiting just beyond the outer gate. No one saw her go. No alarm was tripped. To the estate staff, Amira had merely gone to the spa the next morning. But by then, she was already gone, headed south, en route to a small airport with fake ID, a private jet, and $14 million in cryptocurrency secured in a flash drive wrapped in cotton in her bra. When Bernard's body was found, it was 9:12 a.m. The housekeeper had knocked 3 times. No answer. She entered. She screamed. The first police officer on scene described the master bedroom as serene, almost staged. Bernard's body was laid out with his hands clasped, the silk sheets pulled up to his chest. His face was relaxed. No sign of violence. No blood. Only later at the coroner's office did they discover what was missing. Literally missing. The room fell silent when the medical examiner spoke. He was castrated. And that's when they remembered the estate's name. Elysium. Not a palace. Not a home. A resting place. The name was never ironic. It was prophetic. It was a Tuesday morning when the scream echoed to the marble halls of Elysium. At exactly 9:12 a.m., Maria, Bernard Hale's housekeeper 16 years, unlocked the master suite with the backup key. Breakfast had been prepared hours earlier. The coffee on his tray now cold, untouched. Bernard always rose at 6:30 sharp. He wasn't just punctual, he was obsessive, a man who tracked time the way others track blood pressure. But this morning, silence. And then the scream. Loud, raw, trembling through corridors that had never heard anything so human. She didn't see blood at first. There wasn't any. Not on the ivory carpet, not on the silk sheets. But Bernard's face was wrong. Too still. Not sleeping. Not resting. Just vacant. She backed out of the room without touching a thing. Her fingers shook as she dialed 911. The call log would later read, "Male unresponsive. Billionaire estate. Suspected death." And in that moment, Elysium ceased to be a home. It became a crime scene. Detective Elias Monroe arrived at 9:47 a.m. The same detective who'd once investigated the suicide of a hedge fund CEO in Lake Forest, who'd handled the home invasion of a judge's son. And now, he stood under the crystal chandelier of a dead man's empire, scanning the room where Chicago's most powerful titan had died in his sleep. Except it didn't look like a natural death. Bernard was fully dressed. Pajama top, robe, silk pants. His arms were folded neatly over his chest. The bedspread had barely shifted. There were no pills nearby. No signs of overdose, suffocation, struggle. Too peaceful. Stage dressing, Monroe murmured. Somebody arranged this. The coroner's team arrived within the hour, and what they discovered next would flip the investigation upside down. When the body was moved for examination, a small, almost invisible stain appeared on the sheets, near the groin. A faint rust-brown discoloration. The robe had been carefully tied to conceal it. The forensic team requested a full autopsy. 4 hours later, the lead medical examiner delivered his report to Monroe in a low, steady voice. "Sir, he's been castrated." Silence fell over the room. "Post-mortem?" Monroe asked. The examiner shook his head. "Ante-mortem. He was alive during the mutilation." "Any signs of restraint?" "No, but he was sedated. We found trace amounts of metazoline. Strong stuff. Illegal in the U.S. Can knock out a grown man in minutes. Lethal dosage? Not by itself. When combined with blood loss and pre-existing heart conditions, yes, it was enough to stop his heart. The timeline became clear. Bernard Hale was drugged, mutilated, and left to die in his own bed, under the illusion of peaceful sleep, death in silk sheets. The media didn't wait long. By the next morning, headlines flooded every platform. Billionaire Bernard Hale found dead. Foul play suspected. Silk sheets and secrets. Hale estate now crime scene. New bride missing after husband's death. Because Amira Lewis was gone. Disappeared. No note. No forwarding address. No cell signal. Her passport hadn't been scanned at any major airport, and Elysium staff swore she had simply left for a spa appointment around 7 a.m. But when investigators checked the security footage, they found nothing. Why? Because it wasn't recording. Every single camera feed from the interior of the house had been looped, hacked with pre-recorded footage that ran smoothly, uninterrupted, for exactly 48 hours. Just long enough to cover her arrival and her escape. It was a surgical disappearance. And someone had helped her pull it off. Dean Hale was the first to suggest it wasn't just Amira. She wasn't smart enough to pull this off alone, he told Detective Monroe. Someone funded her, trained her. The surveillance tampering? The poison? That's not amateur work. Dean dug into her background with a private team of his own. And that's when they hit the next wall. Amira Lewis didn't exist. Not before 3 years ago. No high school diploma. No tax returns. No childhood address. Just a forged social security number tied to a nursing license in Miami that had never been used. And then they found a real clue. A hospital administrator in Kansas remembered a woman matching Amira's face from a domestic violence shelter in 2019. The woman's name then? Talia Boone. No family. No ID. A whisper of a person trying to disappear. The record showed she filed a restraining order against a man named Clay Merritt, an underground boxing promoter linked to multiple missing person cases. And just like that, a new theory emerged. What if Talia had gone underground, only to resurface as Amira Lewis? And what if Clay Merritt, the man she once fled, had become her partner in this scheme? A con, a kill, a vanishing act paid in diamonds. But the story wasn't over. 3 weeks after Bernard's funeral, an encrypted flash drive was delivered anonymously to Detective Monroe's desk. No sender, no fingerprint, just a single video file labeled Elysium_final. The footage opened with a handheld shot of the estate's bedroom. Amira's voice whispered behind the camera. They'll call me a gold digger, a monster, but I want you to see who he really was. Then silence, and then Bernard, half awake, disoriented, speaking into the camera. Why are you doing this? He muttered. You hurt people. Amira's voice replied. You hurt me. He tried to sit up. You don't even remember me, do you? She stepped into frame. Calm. Calculated. My mother worked for you. She died cleaning your floors. Bernard blinked, slow and blank. You buried her with a severance check and a non-disclosure agreement. And then the screen went black. It changed everything. Motives shifted. Sympathy shifted. The world watched with fresh eyes. Was it revenge? Justice? Or still just cold-blooded murder? Detective Monroe leaned back in his chair as the footage ended. She didn't kill him because she loved his money, he whispered. She killed him because she hated him. And so, Bernard Hale's legacy ended not with a final deal, not with a handshake or speech or family around his bed, but in silence, drugged, mutilated, alone. He died in the house he built to feel untouchable. But even silk sheets can't smother a guilty conscience. And Elysium, his paradise, became his prison. The question now wasn't whether he deserved it. The question was, where is she now? If this story shocked you, it should. Behind the smiles, behind the wealth, behind the wedding gown, was a plan soaked in betrayal and blood. These aren't just crimes. They're family crimes. The kind that begin with love and end with a body bag. Backhand Index Boeing Right subscribe to the Family Crime Exposed for more true stories they tried to bury. Speech Balloon drop a comment. Was it revenge or cold-blooded murder? Thumbs up like. Repeat button share. Because someone you know might be living a story just like this, we expose what others keep silent. Every week. Only here